Good evening. Erev Tov. You know what that means? You just said it. Oh, good. You guys are really good at this. So, Comfort My People, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but really the theme that Seth also came up with this one, and I'm really glad for it because can there be peace in the Middle East? That's what it says on your flyer. Can there be peace in the Middle East? And the answer is no, so you can all go home now and get a cup of coffee on the way out. Actually, there can be peace in the Middle East. But Jesus made it very clear, the Bible makes it very clear that if we're reconciled to God, if we give our lives to God, we have peace with God. We can have peace with God, and the war is over. The war is over between you and God, between you and your misunderstanding, between you and all the errors you made along the way. It's over. There's no more fighting. The battle's over. You have peace with God. Therefore, we have peace with God. But how does it go from there to the next one? And that we really spoke about this morning too. Ultimately, it is a coalition between Jew and Gentile which make up the one new man, because when the one new man is formed, it's one new humanity he's speaking about. And obviously it's not this merge biologically, but it's a spiritual merge between two people groups. There are only two people groups in the world. There's more now. But in God's eyes, biblically, there's two people groups, Jew and Gentile. And so they were at odds with each other for so long that it was called an ancient hostility or perpetual enmity. So it had no sign of ever ending until Jesus hung on the cross. Because it says when that happened, the eternal purpose of God was filled. The eternal purpose of God was fulfilled with Jesus on the cross, thus making peace between these two hostile groups. Forever, it seemed like it would never end, and we spoke this morning about how that period of time when Ephesians was written was one of the worst, and there's a lot of worst ones. There's a lot of bad periods of time for the Jews and for Israel, but that was one of the worst. And so that was the time when God, in the fullness of time, gave Paul the apostle a vision, a revelation of the one new man. You guys, anybody have some coffee? I don't want to be the only one drinking. But there's one thing about that. He says that this was a mystery that was previously concealed. But Paul says, but now being revealed to the apostles and the prophets in Jesus. So the mystery, he goes on to say, was that the Gentiles can receive the same salvation and be part of the body of believers. But that mystery was not revealed at that point. It was already revealed earlier, and in the book of Acts, chapter 15, that was the big problem. That the Jews that were all believers, almost all of them were Jews at that time, not long after Pentecost, and they're spreading out into this not too far from Jerusalem, but into the Roman world, and they're starting to share the gospel, and Gentiles are going, I want in. They see these Jews living together, sharing everything, loving each other. They've never seen this before. No idols worship, just this one true God, which they're just hearing about for the first time. And they're hearing about some of the things that Paul would be teaching, Peter would be teaching, John would be teaching. They're all out there. And so this is all brand new to them. But they didn't know what to do with it. And so the believers were all Jewish. They're saying, hey, we got a problem. The Gentiles want this. What's the story here? And so they had to go back into the scriptures and say, is this biblical? That the Gentiles can get saved. And it seems so weird because it hadn't happened before, other than rare. It's not unusual. I mean, Ruth is like, for me, there should be a denomination called Ruthism. Ruthianity, something like that. But she's just an incredible example of what it means to be in this one new humanity. So she says to Naomi, who is totally depressed, she's a Jewish woman. She's totally depressed, lost her husband, her 2 sons, and there was no hope for her future. And she's going back to a land that she heard that the famine had ended to, but she doesn't know for sure what she's going to do. She has no way of living. And she's a widow. So she says, but she's not going to let Ruth is not going to let her mother-in-law leave, even though her her husband, Ruth's husband's gone. She says, and you know this, right at the border of Moab, and if you go to Israel, you could actually see Moab across the Jordan River. You could picture this whole thing happening. And she says that, no, where you go, I'm going. You know, your God shall be my God, your people my people. Where you die, there I will be buried. And that's the kind of thing that is like, man, I am in. She didn't know what she was in for, but just think about what happened next. Sooner, not immediately, but she meets this guy, Boaz, who's pretty well off. He owns a field. She gleans the field, and he says, she looks like a pretty nice lady. I think I'm going to get to know her. He hears her whole story, and the next thing you know, he's proposing. They get married. They have a kid. That kid grows up, has a kid, and guess who that kid is? It's Obed, the father of David. David, fast forward 14 generations later, who's born in a, I'll give you a clue, he was born in a manger in Bethlehem. So who is that guy? It's Jesus. So out of this relationship between Jew and Gentile, what is born? The Messiah of the world, not just of Israel, of the world. And this is just a picture of the one new man. There's other pictures in the Bible that are like that. But, so here's the thing. If the one new man was new information, then there's a second part of it, because it's called the eternal purpose of God. It's called his masterpiece, because the only other place in the Bible which the masterpiece is mentioned is in the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 20, where he's speaking of a new creation without sin, is absolutely perfect. I can't verify that, but if you talk to Adam someday, he'll say, he's right. It was perfect then. But then sin came in the world and it started to change. And so we don't get a picture. We love it. Virginia, at this time of the year, man, we're so grateful to be here, because it's like, you see, for spring, it's perfection. It's not perfect, but perfection's relative to us. But it wasn't to them. And so when he calls the one new man his masterpiece, he's talking about what creation was like. All the things made, that's what he's talking about. And he says, and so the one new man is this new creation. And so we're made for good works by which he preordained. So I didn't bring that out this morning. So he preordained these good works that we're to walk into. But what are those good works? You know, we try to figure that out. We have seminars about that and whatnot. But the good works are basically, it's right here in the same chapter. You get, it's spiritual in nature. You don't have to run out looking for a Jewish person for the one new man to take place and then have an agreement. We're going to be like this from now on. That's not what he's talking about. It begins in the heart. If your heart is for God's heart, he's going to lead you into a relationship with the Jewish people. Jews, we told you this morning, Jews and Israel means Jews, people, and place. It's inseparable in God's eyes. So whenever you talk about Israel, you're talking about people and a place. So if you're anti-Semite, that means you hate Israel. No, I never said that. Well, you do, because that's what it means. Well, I don't hate the Jewish people, I just hate Israel. Well, then you're an anti-Semite, because you hate the land, you hate the people. So there's no separation. You can't make up your own words. You try, but it doesn't work. You know, or you got a lot of new language going around today, but it doesn't mean it's right. But what is right is that we get so hooked on the Bible that we say, you know what, I'm going to start believing this thing. And I know you do this, and you know you have all done this, but sometimes the anchor just seems to be way out there, and I'm way over here. And so we have to pull on the anchor every once in a while to see, really, where am I? Where am I in this biblical story, this biblical continuum, which is called life? And I really think that if we do anything here, we could move the barometer towards, don't take this politically, please, towards Israel, because that's where God's heart always was. It doesn't change. I, the Lord, change not. So if he says, you know, you're the apple of my eye, you're my bride, you're my darling, he says things so affectionate, so endearing about Israel. You know, you're my brother, my son, my daughter. Only God can talk to a son and a daughter the same way, because he's seeing spiritually into the heart, and his heart's always been there. I've loved Jeremiah 31. I've loved you with an everlasting love, but I'm sending you into captivity. What kind of love is that? I know my plans I have for you, says the Lord. But then you're going into 70 years captivity. It makes it very clear. So what kind of love is that? God loves those he disciplines is who he loves. Those he scourges. It's just, so we can't be confused that God singling out Israel because they're special. It's not that way. The only thing that's special about them is that God singled them out for a role to play, which is to be the small guy in this one humanity called the one new man, the eternal purpose of God. It's his masterpiece. This is what we're supposed to be part of. You want to do those good works that are foreordained? How do I do it? What do I play? What role do I play in this, Lord? This is new information to me. And I'm not about to tell you the 1, 2, 3s of this, but I know it's in Scripture. That's a clue. And I know if you ask God to reveal his heart to you, he will give it to you if you're willing to accept it. Because he gives one heart. When we're saved, he gives Jews and Gentiles the same heart, according to Ezekiel chapter 11. One heart. So if your heart is for God, your heart's going to be for the Jew. If you're a Gentile, if your heart's for God, if you're a Jew, it's going to be for the Gentile. Because you want to see God fulfill his plan on this earth so that there will be peace to men and women of goodwill. That's where it all goes. It starts and ends there. Because when he says that when Jesus hung on the cross, he made peace there. And 4 times it mentions peace in chapter 2 of Ephesians. 4 times. So he's very serious about peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called the children of God. So it's not something that we invent peace to have peace. That's not how God works. We want that. It's easier. Let's have a peace treaty. I'll write it up. You sign it. I'll sign it. And, we'll have peace. How long does that last for? I remember as a kid, we'd be blood brothers. You're like 4 years old and you're carving your hand up so it'll bleed. And your friend carves it up, you put some blood on each other, and all of a sudden you're blood brothers, and the next day you're fighting each other. It doesn't really last long. It's the same thing in the Middle East. It's been that way ever since. So peace is not going to come through politics. It's not going to come through peace treaties or sitting at a peace table. The only peace table is where Jesus is sitting, and there's one person here who loves him, and another person here who loves him. They're different, but they love him enough to say, forget these differences. What's more important is our likeness. And so that's why I want to talk to you about the ministries we support, because all of them are working towards this goal, not the goal of we're going to be one new man. We're going to pray this one new man in, we're all going to have peace. It's not that at all. And Israel is different. The Ephesians 2 and 3 is read like one new man. Yeah, of course. Jews and Gentiles, the believers, we're one new man. Because the Messianic community, Messianic meaning believing in Jesus as the Messiah in Israel, is made up of Jews and Gentiles. It's not just Jews. So there's Gentiles that came to Israel at some point in their lives because God's called them. I've met many of them. Called them back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s and 90s, and even today. Called them supernaturally. I don't know, God called me to go to Israel, for as long as I can go. You get a visa, maybe you can get 2 months there. But, and then you come back again. Why? I don't know. I'm being drawn. I feel God's drawn me. And the next thing you know, these relationships starts to build, and the body of Messiah, we call it the body of Christ. It's the same thing. It should be the same thing. But they don't know that it's not the same here in America, which is really sad. Because the spiritual life that opens up when that spiritual reality becomes your own, then what Paul said is, this is the mystery that's revealed. That was already revealed. What he's saying in a few verses later in Ephesians 2, he says, the plan for the mystery is what's new. So they knew at this point, because all throughout the Bible, this blessing towards the Gentiles, the blessing of Abraham was always supposed to move out of his household into his neighbor's household, into the families of the world, the nations of the world, where they would have this opportunity to accept the peace that comes with the blessing that was given to Abraham. In the Middle East is a problem. Before we get to the problem, the solution is to be part of the plan. That's what it says in Ephesians 2. The revelation wasn't new, the plan part was new. And if we're going to read and accept and believe, we have to know what is God's plan for me regarding the one new man. Not regarding you, but me. And this is when things start to change. This is when people who thought nothing of the Jews all of a sudden start to think about Jews. And I know there's people in this room would say, yeah, I know, that happened to me out of nowhere. But it's common. It's more common in Israel, but it's becoming more common here, which is exciting, extremely exciting. So when we talk about bringing peace, we say the only way it's going to come is through Jesus. The only way Jesus does things on earth that I know of since started reading the Bible, because I've never seen Jesus on earth. I don't know, any of you guys seen Jesus on earth? He said that I will build my church, right? And I remember working at Mary Ann's house and her sisters and brother-in-law's house, and we built their house. And I never saw Jesus working there. I never saw him like with that level. We could have used him a lot. It was really cold. He would have solved a lot of problems. But I never saw him. So I don't know if you have, but he said, I will build my church, but where is he? If he's going to build it, where is he? Well, just like he does everything. God almost always throughout the Bible, when he says, I will do it, he expects his followers to do it. Except when it comes to splitting the Red Sea and things of that nature. He usually does that. But the other things he does do. But I will build my church means that, wow, where is it? What does it look like? Is it in Rome? Is that the Basilica? Is that it? Or maybe it's in Europe. They have a lot of beautiful churches there. No one goes to church there anymore, but they're beautiful. Is that the church he was talking about? What is the church that Jesus said he built? Well, the church, according to Ephesians 2 and 3, is this connection of Jew and Gentile. So we really will not see it unless it happens. So there's much more to talk about there, but we're going to save some of that for tomorrow night. And but I have to say that because it's a trailer, otherwise no one will come back. And maybe you could bring your own coffee tomorrow. But the thing I really want to talk about is the direction where this takes place and actually can bring peace. So if you could play that trailer, I guess. No, it's not a trailer. It's a video about Comfort My People. It's fresh off the what do you call it? Yeah, fresh off something. But it's really
Did
good.
you know the Jewish people are considered an unreached people group, yet they are the ones who brought the Messiah into the world? Did you know Israelis do not have a Bible in modern-day Hebrew, even though their ancestors wrote it? Did you know replacement theology is the belief that God has replaced Israel with the church, and therefore the promises made to Israel are no longer relevant? Did you know theology matters? Specifically, replacement theology led to the brutal killing of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust, among countless other events throughout history. Did you know, since the attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, there has been an unprecedented increase in anti-Semitism worldwide, yet the church remains largely silent? Did you know, the Lord's eternal purpose, according to Ephesians 2, is to unite Jews and Gentiles as the one new man. This is why Comfort My People exists today. In Isaiah 40, the Lord tells us to comfort my people. We are seeking to do just that, bringing the church alongside Israel for a time such as this. We are a nonprofit 501c3 outreach ministry primarily to the Jewish people in Israel and a teaching ministry to the church regarding her roots and calling. We provide prayerful and financial assistance to 12 ministries in Israel through the generous gifts of our partners in the U.S. and beyond. The people of Israel remain a vastly unreached people with a historical resistance to the gospel, which is what makes the spread of the gospel a challenge that requires great sensitivity and creativity. That is why it is critical to support our indigenous partners. Through the partners of Comfort My People, there are new Bible translations coming out from the Bible Society of Israel, making the gospel accessible and understood in the ancient language it was written. There are mothers choosing life for their unborn children through the love and care provided by Biad Chaim. Young men and women who have faced unthinkable trauma serving in the IDF are discipled by mature believers, helping them recover and go forth into their future through Lech Lecha. Immigrants who are consistently coming into Israel due to anti-Semitism are given practical help and the gospel through the ministries of Voice of Judah and Pillar of Fire. Holocaust survivors are comforted by loving believers listening to their hardships and pointing them to Yeshua by Reach Initiative International. Palestinian and Jewish believers are learning how to love one another through the example of Holy Land Missions. Many are receiving free legal help through the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. The hearts of children are being reached in the heart of Jerusalem by Little Hearts Preschool. The word of the Lord is going forth through faithful servants, sharing it on street level, sowing the word in tears, and reaping fruit for the kingdom through Awake Israel. Are a Muslim-born believer, and Roger, an Arab Christian who have embraced God's love for the Jewish people and stepped out in faith to make God's eternal purpose a reality. Through our partners, we are seeing Israel come alive. As Jesus walked past the smoldering wick, he saw Israel. She was like the flame that had stopped burning because her oil had drained in the night. When he saw that wick, he didn't just see a wisp of smoke. He saw the flame that would return one day. And that day, the wick which lost its purpose would shine again with oil that would never burn out. The lamp which seemed as useless as the broken reed would light up Jerusalem in righteousness and salvation like a burning torch. Comfort My People supports believers in Israel who represent the smoldering wick, which is coming back to life. Our partnership adds fuel to the flame. One day soon, the light that shines within them will spread into their nation and restore Israel to a rightful place in the kingdom of Yeshua. What if we, the church, discovered God's eternal purpose to unite Jew and Gentile, then made it a priority to unite ourselves with Israel for His will to be done on earth as it is in heaven?
That's the first time I saw that. I saw it in the rough, but so you guys are the first audience. But it's a real quick synopsis of the ministries we support in Israel. So our motto is that the gospel to the love of Yeshua to the people, the Jewish people in Israel and beyond. So obviously there's Jews other places. There's about 15 million Jews in the world. There's getting close, over 9 billion people in the world. So that leaves the Jews an incredible minority population-wise. But when it comes to believers, you know, there's organizations that measure, that do the metrics of how many believers there are all over the world, and they keep the data because there's groups that are looking to reach the unreached people groups of the world, because Matthew 24:14 says that this gospel must be preached to the whole world and then the end will come. I don't think that's the only thing that has to happen for the end to come, though. That's my thinking. This is what I get out of the Bible. But it is what Jesus said, so it's certainly a major part of it. So the gospel has to go out. Whether that means to every single individual, I'm not sure. But it means something. It makes it very important to get the gospel where the gospel is not. This is God's heart. So one of the metrics is that if you're, and they changed the way they phrase this, but an acceptable phrase is that if there's less than 2% of the population are considered Bible-believing, evangelical-minded Christians, that means you read the Bible seriously and you're involved in integrated forms of worship and teaching, like in a church. So that's how they measure the percentage. If it's under 2%, it's considered an unreached people group. So that could be an entire nation or part of a nation, different groups living, different nationalities within one country. So when you go to Israel, so I was asked to start a ministry in Israel in 2013. But I had to kind of prove that Israel was really an unreached people group, because why would Israel be an unreached people group? The Jews have the Bible, they have, they're reached. It's not like they're living out in the jungles, but it's believers who are believers. And it would make no sense in the natural to think that Israel would be an unreached people group. But if you do the legwork for the stats, which I actually had to do this because I had to prove that Israel was an unreached people group as a nation, even though it's made up of 100 nationalities, Israel, if you can imagine that. A nation the size of New Jersey, 100 nationalities. And so all of those represent languages too. And not everyone gets to learn Hebrew too quickly. It's not an easy language. So, but you have numbers there. So if you're in the Joshua Project, for instance, they go around the world and they collect these stats. And in Israel, in 2013, the number of believers, now this is believers across the board, not Catholic, Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, or just people that are, like I said before, Bible-believing Christians, but they don't call them Christians in Israel. So it's Messianic believers or believers, Israeli believers, period. So the number then was 0.5% of believers, 0.5%. So 2% we're looking at, they were 0.5% of believers, which included Gentiles. Gentile and Jewish believers, the Messianic community combined. If you singled out just the Jews in there, it was 0.025%. The minimum is 2% in order to be an unreached people. You're talking about a group of people who wrote the Bible. All the prophets were Jewish. I believe all the writers of the entire Bible, including Luke, you can yell at me later, but are Jewish. So that would make, and if you take Luke out, it's all but Luke. They're all the writers, these are the writers of the Bible, all Jewish. And then where's the Messiah come from? His mother and father, of course his father being God, but his father that raised him, Jewish. They're all Jewish. They all have Jewish names. They speak Hebrew. They grew up in Israel. Why are they unreached? They have a Bible, but they can't understand it because it's written in a language that's so ancient. It's like if you and I were to read Chaucer, you wouldn't be able to understand it. And that's what their Bible is like, up until recently. And that's because the Bible Society, whom we've been supporting since the beginning, has been working feverishly on translation that's accurate. Accurate means that it has to be perfectly accurate according to all the translation terms that are acceptable across the board, no matter what language you use. That's the specificity they had to do to make a translation from the Masoretic text to a readable modern Hebrew. And so they're almost done with it, almost very close to finishing it. It'll be the first one in the history of the world that will come out where Jews could sit in their own house, read a Bible without a rabbi, or calling the rabbi, "Rabbi, I'm trying to read this book, I can't understand it because the language is too crazy to me." That it's not the whole Bible that's that hard, but there's a lot of places where it's just too hard to figure it out. And when it comes to Isaiah 53, the rabbis tear it to pieces because it's speaking about Jesus. You cannot miss it. If you're an American reading it in English, if you're a Jew reading it in the Masoretic text, I believe you still can't miss it. But because they're already trained not to understand the Bible, just like the Catholics were trained not to read in Latin, then they don't even bother. It's like, read the Bible. Come on, no one does reads the Bible. We read it, but we don't understand it. You read it and you recite it. Like when I was a kid, went to Hebrew school, you read Hebrew, you write Hebrew, you recite Hebrew, but you have no idea what it says, and no one tells you. It's like, that's kind of weird when you look back. But now it's going to be different. Very soon, they're going to be able to publish it. The only thing that's stopping is money. And the war has really put the brakes on it because everyone who was a soldier was called back as a reservist, and Israel's just a different world since October 7th, which I'll talk about a little more. But this Bible is going to be a game changer. So they already have it in the audio version. Our friend Victor Kalisher, who some of you have come to Israel with me, met. He does the audio. You would love it, Steve. And Marianne, you guys have been there. I'm sure there's others I can't think. But we're living in an age where the impossible is being made possible. It's really remarkable. And so why do I say this? So it goes back to Comfort My People. Why the name Comfort My People? because God said, name it, come from my people. I said, God, what name should we call this? We asked to start this ministry. I don't know how to start a ministry. I work with wood all my life. I make dust and noise. That's the only thing I know how to do. I don't know how to name a ministry. I don't know how to run a ministry. I don't know how to collect people to be part of a ministry. So I did the weird thing. I asked God, and he says, I'll look through the scriptures a little while, tell me what you come up with. So I said, come from my people. How's that sound? He says, I like that name. So I started going back to Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 and 2 specifically. And you actually read it up there in Hebrew. It says, Nachmu, Nachmu, Ami. Nachmu means comfort. It says it twice, comfort, comfort my people. Comfort my people. It says it twice. Whenever God says something twice, we should sit up and listen. But then he says, tell her that her warfare is ended, her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received double from the Lord's hand. Well, what's that all about? That she received double. What is that about? Why would she receive double? So it's good news. Tell her this. Your warfare is ended, just like we talked about in Romans 5:1. You don't have to fight with God anymore. Why? Because, and this is prophetic though, so you got to understand this is a prophecy in order to understand what it's saying. Because in Isaiah's day, they still hadn't gone into captivity. They were about to go into Babylon. The Assyrians had already taken the northern tribes, and he's speaking to the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin, but they hadn't gone to captivity yet. And he's telling them, your warfare is over, but they know that Babylon's on the doorsteps, ready to take them away. All this prophetic thing, all the gatherings of Babylon was an empire. It's hard to hide an empire when they're warring after you. So they knew that they were on the run soon, but they were going to be, and God said, just go with them. Don't fight them, just go with them. When you get there, pray for their peace, the welfare of the country, just be there. And he tells through Jeremiah later on that you're going to be there for 70 years. So that's not too good if you're in your 80s, but if you're just born, maybe you have something to look forward to, I don't know. But God tells them you're coming back. You are coming back, and that's good news. And he kept his promise, perfect promise. There's a lot to say about that, but I have to restrain myself. So, comfort my people, speak tenderly to Jerusalem, tell her her warfare is over. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem, it says in Hebrew, exactly to the heart. Go right to the heart. But who's he talking to? He's talking to some group of people, and he says, comfort my people. So there's two groups of people. You comfort my people. You comfort my people. So who are my people? Well, up until that time, there were no Christians. Sorry to say that, none yet. By faith, there are Christians all over the world. But there's no Christians in that day. So he says, comfort my people. He has to mean his people, Israel. But who are the people he's telling to comfort my people? Now, this is prophetic. There's only Jews and Gentiles there, and they're not mixing in Israel at this time at all. So he's speaking prophetically, and he says this, this is leading up to prophecy that some is going to be soon, some is going to be in the last days. We have to discern that sometimes. The people he's talking about are the only people that can comfort, are the people that receive comfort according to the New Testament. You cannot comfort someone if you have not received comfort. What is comfort? It's the knowledge that your warfare is over, the iniquity is pardoned. But the double, what's that about? So this is the thing though, if you're a Gentile, does this pertain to you? That's a yes or no. It's not a multiple choice. Okay, so I just wanted to know if you guys are still here. But if it does, what do you do about that? If God's talking to you and says comfort people, why comfort them? They've received double. We don't want to receive one portion from God for our iniquity. What's the double they receive? Well, the one is they're going into captivity, just like he said. If in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, he gives them all these promises, but if they blow it, the land is literally going to vomit them out of its mouth. The land would do this to them because they violated it. And that happened. So it happened in Assyria, then it happened in Babylon, but he says, but I'm going to bring you back. So the iniquity was going out into captivity. That's the double part. That's part of the double part. They went into captivity. Babylon and Assyria. But it happened again. After Jesus died in 70 AD, 135 AD, there was hardly a Jew to be found in Israel because they were either dead, executed, or running for their lives because it wasn't safe to be a Jew anymore because Rome was sworn enemy to destroy them completely. So they were scattered. So the first iniquity was going into captivity. The second one was going into captivity into the land, not to one nation, not into one empire, but into the land of the Gentiles. Gentiles, wherever you look, there's Gentiles. There's no temple, there's no Jerusalem, there's no Israel. There's a synagogue if you make some small kind of a box of a house and do it where no one sees you and you meet together. On occasion, it wasn't like that. For the most part, it was. Even by the time I was bar mitzvahed in last century, it was a storefront. It was a small storefront on a main road that looked like a store. It didn't look like a synagogue. So you went in there, and that was it. That was our quote-unquote synagogue, your church. But Jews were not outward until later on, really, because after World War II, Jews were still afraid, very much afraid of the Gentile world. Because why? Because after 2,000 years of being sent into a Gentile world, they found out it's not a very friendly place for a Jew to be. But where else do you go on the planet? There's no place else to live. We can't go back. We don't have a homeland. So who comes along in the year 33 AD, 34 AD? Believers start showing up. Within another 5-10 years, it's a Gentile church that have been comforted because their sin is pardoned. They're free. They're liberated. Well, what should they do then? They should go to their Jewish neighbors and say, hey, I'm sorry we screwed up. Now, it wasn't immediately. There was a great mingling. That was the one new man. It was a success. What God prayed for, Jesus prayed for the unity of the two, it was happening in the first century. It was beautiful. Nothing like it. Jesus said, I will build my church. There it was. We could look in history and say, I saw your church. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Where is it today? Did you move it to Paraguay? I haven't seen it. Now, I'm not saying that this is not a church. Don't get me wrong. I really love this place, and I love the people. The people are the place. The place is secondary. But as a whole, this is what I'm talking about, so don't get all riled up that I'm being personal and I'm attacking you. I'm not. I love the church that Jesus said he would build. I love building. I love it. I want to help him build his church. But it's very hard when you see the resistance. That's not obvious resistance. It's just like, why bother with the Jews? You see a Jew? You see a Jew? I see a Jew? I don't see any Jews. Why bother thinking and praying and talking about them? God's done with the Jews. That replacement theology was set in cement by the 2nd century. By the 3rd, 4th century, Jews were not allowed in churches. They were not allowed to do the practices of Passover first. Any of the Jewish practices, they weren't allowed to do. They changed Passover, exit out, delete it, cancel it, and instead we put Easter. Hanukkah, forget Hanukkah, throw that out. It doesn't mean anything. Instead, we have Christmas. We'll celebrate Jesus' birth. That's biblical, isn't it? So, and interesting, it's in the 25th of December when Hanukkah is the 25th of Kislev. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, all the practices, and then you couldn't speak Hebrew. And if you did any of these things and you wanted to be in the church, this is if you wanted to remain, because they were spreading them out, by 325 BC, AD, the Nicene Council proclaimed that Jews are not allowed here. If they want to be here in the church, they have to renounce their faith, their background, their rituals, their practices completely, no Hebrew, and then they pay a tax. Very much like Islam. If you want to live in a Muslim world, you have to pay a tax, a very high tax. And this is what the Jews had to do. All throughout their diaspora, it was like this. Sometimes better than others, but all the time they're being blamed for all the ills of each nation they're in. And I can name several of them. And so, what happened to comfort my people? Why is no one practicing comfort my people? Why did we call it comfort my people? Do you remember what the answer was? Thank you. God said so. Why? Because he wants his people comforted. So guess how it's happening? We have 12 ministries that we support, and they are doing the work. They're doing the job of bringing the gospel to their people in a very creative and carefully, because you have to be very careful to bring the gospel in Israel. You don't go on a street corner and preach the gospel. You could if you're an Israeli Jew. You're a citizen, you're allowed free speech. You couldn't if you were an American tourist. You would be thrown out of the country. You could try, but you probably won't be able to come back. They would very politely get you to the airport where you would buy your own ticket, and they would say, see you, maybe, but you wouldn't. Because the Gentiles, and this isn't popularized, and it's not this anger over it, but it's like, we know what happens after a while. The Gentiles are going to turn on us. We know it. It's history, 2,000 years of history. And I'll tell you this, and it hurts me to say it, but when I got saved, I wanted to share the gospel with my father so badly, because I got saved, and I met Christians. Marla and I went to church. We loved the people, and the people loved us. We were so welcome. We knew nothing about church, and they found out we were Jews. Wow, I love the Jewish people. I love Israel. You do? Like, I didn't even think of Israel. This was a long time ago. I didn't think about Israel. And so I say, I got to tell my father, because he was a real atheist. He came from Russia. He knew anti-Semitism very clearly through his life and all that stuff, the whole family, etc. Eastern Europe, my mother's from, her family. And so they suffered. They came to the U.S. because of that. So he listened to me. I went to his house. I'm talking to him in the basement because I knew if my mother heard, it would be curtains for me. So we're talking about Jesus. Because he's an atheist, he doesn't really care much about people's beliefs. And he was a real atheist, by the way, because he saw so much wrong. He said there can't be a God because God is good from what he heard, and there's not too much good in this world. A lot of hatred. I can't believe there's a God, period. There isn't. But I said, Dad, there is a God, and Jesus is him, and I gave my life to him. And he's like, of all the things you've done in your life that were wrong, this is it. But he listens to me because he loves me. I'm his son, but my mother wouldn't have listened to me. So, not that she didn't love me, but she experienced worse. So, I get to him, I said, Dad, no. These people, they love the Jews and they love Israel. And we talked for as long as we could before my mother started yelling for him to come upstairs. And he says, let me tell you one thing. You scratch these Gentile friends of yours deep enough, they will bleed anti-Semitism. And that was the end of that conversation. That conversation. Fast forward 50 years later, 30 years later, he gets saved. A miraculous story, but I won't tell it. But that's not unusual to think like that, because they've seen so much wrong that it's hard to believe that there's really something right under the covers, because no one gets close enough. To comfort someone, don't you have to get close to them? Now, I'm not saying you have to go to Israel to do this. But what I am saying is, like, when I go to Israel since October 7th, I hear this repeatedly. What happened to the church? On October 7th, we heard so much. And now when I say here, they're looking at social media. It's not like they're getting phone calls from, pastors. Some do, of course, there's relationships, but I'm talking about social media. And Jews, Israelis, are addicted to social media. I think I said that this morning. They have more clicks per person per day than anywhere else in the world. They're just always on there, except when they're in war. They don't have them. They don't have their smartphones. But they're very in tune with the voice of the world, and what they hear is from social media. What happened to the church? This is what I get. Well, what do you mean? It's October 7th, they loved us. What can we do to help you? What can we do to help you? We get this all over the place. We're all for you. We're all for you. By October 9th, what are you guys doing? Killing babies in Gaza. What's this about? And then this chatter keeps growing and growing and growing. By October 9th, there's 40-foot banners across major city streets all over the world saying, Allahu Akbar, which means God is greater. Allah is greater than God. Not great, but greater. And from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. The river, meaning the Jordan River, the sea, meaning to the Mediterranean. That's it. That's the borders of Israel. Size of New Jersey. Free means free of Jews, not free that, that's what it means. No Jews. Where's the voice of opposition to that? We don't see it. This is what they say. Where's the church? So when I go there and I say, we've been having a prayer meeting every Tuesday night since October 7th, they're like, you kidding me? Really? Yeah, really. We're praying for you guys all the time. Really? Seriously? Yeah. They get so excited, so thankful. Tell them we're thankful. Everyone says the same thing. We're so thankful. Why don't they hear it all the time? Who's comforting the people that God commanded? He said it twice. It's a command. He makes it very clear. I think it's more of an appeal than a command. He's appealing to the church. Comfort my people. Comfort them. But here's the thing. Nachmu, nachmu ami. Nachmu means comfort. He says it twice. But in Hebrew, the language, all the words have a root system, and they come from a root. Usually it's 3 letters. The root of nachmu is noach. Noach. It's the same, you could probably figure it out, it's the same root that Noah would have. Noach and Noah, same word. Noah's name in Hebrew is Noach. So he's saying to a group of people, it's plural, he says, be a Noah to my people. That would be a literal translation. Be a comfort to my people. How do you be a comfort to my people? Well, the first way, and this is how peace happens, is that teach them to have peace with God. Who's going to be able to get close enough to tell them that? Well, it's going to be a long time for the Gentiles, or unfortunately, unless you start to get to know them. Whenever I bring Gentiles over, people meet them, the Jews love them, always, instantly. But it's different with regular tourism because they never talk to Jews. They never talk to anyone. They stay in their huddled groups, and they go around Israel as tourists. But when they get this one-to-one, one-on-one relationship building, it's all different. It's a different ballgame because they see your people and you see that they're people and they're like, wow, we're being received as people. My dream is to bring Israelis here, to bring them here to worship, to speak, to mingle, stay in your homes, and it'll change everything for them and for you. But they have to hear this gospel. This percentage is ridiculously low. I'll tell you the good news. Since we started Comfort My People, and this isn't attributing it all to Comfort My People, it's because God is moving mightily. And he's using this war like unbelievable to get the attention of Jews to listen to the gospel. But the percentage-wise, and I'm not a guy that does the number thing, but from 0.05, it's now somewhere around 1. Which is really huge number, right? Steve and Natalie, you guys know numbers. I mean, that's a big percentage growth. It's still tiny, but no one knows how much this war has done because the opening, the opportunities. I flew to Israel and about a month or so ago, and I sat next to a girl, a 25-year-old girl. Do I have time, Seth? Good. And it was a 3-seater, and so I'm by the window, and she was in the middle. And I was flying out of Vienna, and they were coming. She was coming back from a ski trip, and so we just started talking. And she was real nice, very interested. She wanted to know more about what I do and all this stuff. And I'm telling her about this vision that God gave us. We're talking about the war and the effect it's having because Israel's in a state of trauma. The entire nation is suffering under trauma. Everyone is. It's just, there's so much to talk about there alone as far as comfort goes. But God gave us a vision It's called the Mishka Center. I'll give you some literature. I think it's out there. You could look at it. It's just a brief intro to it, but it's a vision for, it's called the Mishka Center. It's going to be therapy. Not therapy as we know it in America and life, because in Israel right now, everyone needs therapy. The therapists need therapy. They're building institutes to treat trauma, and they can't build them fast enough, but even after they build them, they have nobody to work there because nobody's in shape to work there. And they don't want to bring foreigners. They don't want to bring Chinese and you know, whatever, to minister psychiatric help, because it doesn't help. The prescription drugs has become an incredible problem. It's almost like nationwide that people are on prescription drugs because they're not finding any help. So there's a lot to this, but so God gave us a vision. How are we going to help this? How are we going to help? So the question came up, is there no balm in Gilead? You know that verse in chapter 8 of Jeremiah? Is there no physician to heal the wound of my people? No, the answer is no. There's no balm in Gilead, and there's no physician that can bring a cure. They're beyond cure. God says this in that same section. So I'm asking God, what is the cure then? If there's no balm in Gilead, what are we going to do? We need to do something. And so a friend of mine who's an Israeli, we've been talking together, praying together ever since October 7th, specifically about the hostages and everyone else that's been affected by war, including the Muslims. I wish I had so much more time to tell you. I could end up. It's time to cut. Cut? Was that a cut? Oh, roll it. It's like Hollywood. I like it. I won't go too far. But I don't want to bore you guys, and I don't want you to have to stay up late. So if you have to leave, I don't feel bad about that. So please do. No, don't leave. I don't like that. But this place is going to be remarkable because it's God's vision, number one, and Mishka is so the balm of Gilead, first of all, was made out of a root. And it was mixed with certain oils. They would mix it up, they make an ointment, and they put it on the wounds. The wounds sometimes would heal, sometimes they just feel better, but never really did anything lasting. So there is no balm in Gilead. It's never going to cure the ill of the daughters of Zion. It might be facial. It's a manufactured thing, basically what it is. So I'm talking to my friend, and I'm saying, there's got to be another word for ointment in Hebrew. And he said, well, there is, mishka. And I said, well, what does it mean? He goes, well, it means ointment. We use it as an ointment. I said, is that it? And he says, well, you know, and we start talking, looking at the word in Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, in the Masoretic text. It translates as the oil, the ointment made from the oil that was used to anoint the priests, to anoint the kings, and to anoint all the articles in the temple and the tabernacle. It's used for, it means anointing to cure or for a purpose, for a healing purpose. That's what it's the translation. Well, that's incredible alone. That's perfect. No, that's not all. So I was talking about root words, right? Noach, remember that? Meaning comfort. So the root word of Mishka is M-S in English, M-S-H, but it's really not an H, it's a ch sound. Can you say ch? So this is Mishka. Say Mishka. Good, because you'll be saying this a lot in the future. Mishka Center. So it's going to be a therapy center. So why is that word important? Because Mishka is the same root as Moshiach. You know that word? Say Moshiach. You know what you just said? Messiah. Yeshua HaMashiach is the same root as Mishka. Who is the cure for all of man's ills? The Messiah. Yeshua HaMashiach. So this is going to be run all by Jewish believers, all of it entirely. We establish it and get the nuts and bolts in place. And we already have the people that are just eager to be a part of this. We don't have the property. I could tell you a lot of stories about the property, but we don't have it yet. And that was one of my reasons on this last trip, to secure a piece of property, but we still don't have it. But we will, because this is God's vision. And ask Rodney, he knows the whole story, actually, and Steve and Natalie, they could tell you. But I believe this, and I believe that you're going to want to be a part of this. And this isn't a plug for money. This is a plug to say, no, we are with you. This is all it is. We are with you. For the Israelis to know that American, especially Christians, are with them. They understand unbelievers. I'm talking about believers now in Israel. They understand unbelievers aren't going to be with them. They know that. They don't go traveling all over the world because it's not safe for them to travel all over the world. So this girl that's sitting next to me in the plane from Vienna to Israel, I was telling her about this place. She goes, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. So she's a soldier. She's finished her term, but her boyfriend isn't. And he's having all these dreams. He was in Lebanon while we were talking. And, he's having just his mind is, off the wall, off the charts. I'd love for him to be able to go to it. I said, well, this is for believers. You understand who the Messianic believers? She goes, I've heard of them. Yeah, I have. So I explained to her what the Messianic believers are. Remember, there's a tiny percentage. Most people don't know them. So you got to know this, because we say Messianic in Israel, especially amongst those who do not like believers in Israel. They call them Moshichim. Moshichim it means Messianic, but it translates as traitors. If you're Moshichim, you're a traitor to your people. So it's not a good word. So it's really not spread that outwardly. Hey, I'm a Messianic believer. Wow, that's so cool. It's like, you are? And I've experienced that. And it's very eerie feeling. So, but I'm telling her this, and she goes, yeah, I have heard of them. And I said, have you met any? I have not met personally, but I know friends that have. And yeah, I'm really interested. So we're talking, and I'm saying, well, can I read a portion of the Bible to you? She, yeah. I said, well, are you familiar with Yehemiah? In Hebrew, Yehemiah is Jeremiah. She goes, no. Jeremiah ever here? No. Well, no, don't feel bad. Most people don't know. I said, but can I read a portion? It's from he's an Israeli, he's a Jewish prophet. Can I read from that? Yeah, please. So I'm reading from Jeremiah 31. And it starts out, a few verses down, it says, that I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with cords of compassion, I am drawing you to me. And she's like, oh my God, that is crazy. Who said that? I said, God's saying that to his people. She goes, really? And her face is like changing. Really? This is God? Yes. And I said, and let me go further. And so I go down further to the part about the new covenant that says, there's coming a day when I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with Moses in the wilderness, which you broke, but this is the covenant I'm going to write in your heart and your mind. I'm going to forgive your sins. You know what sins are? Kind of. Well, everything we do wrong, say wrong, things we don't like, that's what the sins are. They don't know about sins. So she's like, this is incredible. She's like wide open. And then I get the next part, and then he gives us a new heart, a new mind, and a right spirit. Now he's talking to the Jewish people in the future. It's not like that same day. In the future, he's going to do this. A new agreement he's making with all of Israel, all the tribes of Israel. She goes, oh, that's amazing. Go on. And I said, well, you've never heard this before. Never heard this before. And I said, well, you're going to start hearing more and more about this. And I start telling about this Bible, and I tell her where she's going to get one if she goes to the Bible Society in Jerusalem. My close friend runs it, and she's going to go there. I don't know when. She hasn't come yet. I keep asking Victor. But I know she's going to. And I said, I don't want you just to go there, because he's going to give you Bibles. He'll give you all kinds of literature. You'll take with you. You'll give it to your friends. And then he's going to have you over his house for Shabbat. And you're going to meet his daughters, which are about your age, who love Yeshua. And they're Messianic believers. And you will feel so much at home with them. It's like, when can I go? And so she was so excited. And then I look at her closely, because I didn't have my glasses on. I put my glasses on as I was reading, and I turned to her, and tears are just running down her cheek. And she goes, this is just incredible. And now she's choked up. And I said, and I see the girl next to her is younger, like maybe 15 or so. And she said, oh, this is my sister. I go, oh, really? And she's listening too. I said, that's awesome. Oh, my mother's behind you. I go, oh, really? And that's my brother. He's my older brother. And I'm like, and they were all listening to me. And probably everyone on the plane that's Jewish is listening to us too, because that's what they do. And so this is how the gospel is spreading with our partners. They are doing this every day. Every day they're doing this. And I could talk about them all night long. But I'll say one last thing, and I promise I'm done. In the beginning of chapter 31 of Jeremiah, he's talking about there will come a day. It's future tense. There will come a day when watchmen will cry out from the mounts, the hills of Samaria, or Ephraim, some translations say, come, let us go up to Zion, to the city of our God. So that doesn't mean much to you probably, but it says watchmen shall cry out. So watchmen are somebody, they're crying out to the Jews in Samaria, which is what the world calls the West Bank, where Jews have lived forever. He says, come, let us go up to Zion. Us, you and me, us. Just like in Ephesians, it's the we, this new man, it's us. Let us go up to Zion, to the city of the Lord. Well, who's saying this? It says the watchman. Well, if you look up the word watchman in Hebrew, the word there is notzrim, notzrim. It means branches. Literally, it means branches from an olive tree. But if you look up the word watchman in a concordance, you'll come up with all kinds of other words for watchman, mostly shamarim, which is like shepherd. But this is a watchman that's different. The only time he's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as notzrim is right there. The notzrim call from the hills, let's go up. So what's the big deal about notzrim? Well, notzrim, so you have to fast forward now to modern Hebrew in Israel. So Israel is the only language in the world that's ever been resurrected from death. It was no longer a spoken language, it was only used for rituals. So when you get to modern day Israel, they have to come up with all new words. Eliezer ben Yehuda wrote the new Hebrew, modern day Hebrew lexicon or dictionaries and whatnot, almost by himself. And the man never slept. It was like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But you had to come with names for things like airplane, radio, things like that they didn't have. Christian didn't have a name because when the Hebrew Bible was written, there was no Christians. So they didn't have an ancient name for Christians. They called them different things in the first century that weren't bad names. But notzrim means branches, literally from the olive tree. It has to be from the olive tree. The olive tree is very unique qualities to it because the book of Romans talks about two trees, one a wild olive tree, one a natural olive tree. When Jews are part of the natural olive tree, according to the scripture, the Gentiles are grafted in. The branches are grafted in. As a olive orchard, if you have a sick olive tree, it's not producing, you take a branch from an old olive tree, a wild olive tree, like in Romans 11. They don't read Romans 11 to figure this out. They've been doing this for centuries. You cut off a branch from it and you graft it into the old olive tree that's not producing olives, not just one, and it begins to produce. The other thing it does is if you have an olive tree that's old and around the root system is starting to show sickness, decay, although they live forever. Like 4,000 years, they think, one of them in Bethlehem. So they take supple branches. If you've seen olive trees in Israel, they're almost like rope. They're very supple. So they take them, they wrap them around the root system that's above ground. They put dirt around it so it stays there, and it becomes part of the tree. This is the olive branches that happen. They're called notzrim, the olive branches that get wrapped around it, because they come from, and the netzer is the olive branch. Paul uses the same language in Romans 11 to talk about this unity between Jew and Gentile. He says, don't boast if you see these old olive branches on the ground. They can be grafted in much easier than the new olive trees. You boast, you're going to be on the ground like one of them. So Paul's saying, do not be arrogant, but boast in him who has made us one. What happens after these olive branches wrap around the trunk is this old, sick olive tree begins to improve. It begins to bear olives again, and the olives are more nutritious and delicious than ever before. This is a picture of a reality, though. These trees are deeply rooted, deeply rooted. The church is not as deeply rooted. It's sort of fragmented. That's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. But God wants the church to be rooted in the same system, just like we spoke about this anointed oil coming together this morning. And this is what you do to comfort. But if you can't comfort from afar, you could comfort through believers in Israel that are bringing this comfort to their neighbors, their friends, their cousins, the ones that haven't kicked them out of their lives yet. And they're doing it well, really well, beautifully well. And you guys have met them back there too. And so I guess I'm going to leave you there. I'd love to tell you another story, but come back tomorrow, right? 7 p.m. All right, thank you guys. Bless you.